Identify and eliminate the patterns ruining your life. Because it's those patterns that create outcomes, that behavior that equals that result, and that interruption that is needed to create that change. Hi there and welcome. My name is Kanchefu, and here we talk about personal development. In particular, we talk about life after therapy. If you're new here, make sure you press subscribe. But if not, welcome back. So, let us begin. Life falling apart is not random. It comes from a mix of events and experiences and also those actions that are taken. So let's really challenge that belief that things are just going wrong or not falling in place or nothing works for you and begin to stand on a more solid ground. What that metaphor means is developing yourself, encouraging behavior that supports who you are and creates a life that can be maintained. You know, breakdown is a signal much rather than a failure. It is telling you something isn't working. It's making itself present so that you're aware of it to take action on it and give you an opportunity to work on yourself. But if it becomes consistent and leads the way of your life, there's a pattern behind it. If we think about this deeper, repeated problems follow repeated habits. They don't come from nothing. There may be things you do unconsciously because it's an escape. There may be things you do because you find joy, excitement, indifference in them. But that's a repeated pattern. So if they follow each other, what are those problems that have repeated themselves that could have come from repeated patterns? Things that have led up to a situation, to a conversation or argument, to a change in direction of work or friends or family. Is it starting to make itself present now? And I ask that because avoidance creates an accumulation of pressure, which not only makes things harder to navigate, but also constricts, confines, and puts this weight on your shoulders and your mind that can become overbearing, which then coincides with delayed actions, compounding those consequences. One thing leading to another, things becoming harder and harder, and then leaving you in this place where you don't know what to do. And those smaller failures or things that don't work out build into larger breakdown. You know, what can happen? And so you end up treating the features of what seems hard to do or what has led you to this place much rather than the pattern behind it. So what if the issue isn't the situation, but much rather the issue is the pattern producing it? I ask that to reframe it, to help your mind begin to think that the previous way of being, thinking, behaving, and acting has resulted in being here today. But being here today and having this conversation is now an opportunity to decide on where you're going to go next. So let's discuss what that next step could be. First things first, patterns must be identified and broken deliberately. That is the most powerful way of addressing a situation that's not supporting your everyday living, as awareness alone of what is going on and things that aren't working right is insufficient. So interruption requires immediate action. So what could that action be? Identify the pattern. Let's name that repeated negative behavior for what it is and focus on what keeps happening. Is it said action, feelings, thoughts, emotions in a given environment, circumstance? But make it specific and remove any vague language so we can really almost touch what is happening. And then in that, we can locate that trigger point, simply identifying when that pattern begins so that we can recognize those signs early. In other words, catching it before it escalates. Then once you're there, you can define the interrupting action. And that looks like choosing one specific action to break that pattern. And the beautiful thing is, all you have to do is make it simple and direct to assure it can be executed immediately. And now that's all in place, it's about executing that without delay. Once that trigger point has been set, those feelings, those emotions, those thoughts, and that place or environment is present, act. And don't negotiate with the behavior, but instead replace it with the action. You see, you don't stop patterns by thinking about it. You stop them by interrupting them. So we've identified somebody stuck in patterns, delays actions, avoids discomfort, and experiences repeated setbacks, which feels like things are falling apart. When you contrast that with the interruption, that person identifies the pattern early, acts at that trigger point, and breaks the cycle, creating this new behavioral outcome. Same situation, different response, different outcome. These two ways of beings resemble the two ways of acting, thinking, and doing. Now all that's left for you is to identify which direction you want to go in next. And that's where I'm going to leave it today. My name is Kanchefu, and if you enjoyed today's discussion, make sure you press like and subscribe. And make sure you share this with a friend or family member you know would like this conversation. If you feel like your life is falling apart for no reason and would like one-to-one support in navigating that, make sure to comment the word reset or fill out the form in the bio, the Rebuild Scorecard, to identify which area of life you're in right now and what those next steps could be in supporting moving forward. My name is Kanchefu once more. Have a good day, morning, night or evening for wherever you're in the world watching this, and I'll see you next week for our next discussion.